Hi everyone, thank you for being here so early in the morning in DMEXCO. Welcome to the Datorama presentation. We have a great subject and a great panel for this. So we came, we saw, we conquered. How to get ahead of the digital revolution using data. And we've got fantastic people to talk to us about this subject. First of all, we got Brian Wieser here on my left. Brian is, I think it's fair to say, Brian, you are the only analyst on the market who's covering agencies, publisher, marketing technology, and ad tech.
Probably true.
Okay, great. So, great source of knowledge. On top of that, Brian spent 8 years as a head of forecasting at Magna. Yes? So, big expectations, Brian. We expect to know a lot about the future of data. We have Alexis van Vuure. Alexis is the head of marketing for ABN Amro. And obviously has a background agency side as well. And worked on very large accounts agency side. I don't want to get this wrong. I want to say yes, Unilever, Heineken. Yes. Yeah. Then we have Guibert Tchinde, who's a data innovator for Pernod Ricard. Guibert is kind of, in charge of the strategy around bringing data at the heart of the business model for Pernod Ricard. And Guibert has a background in strategy for, I think, large consulting firms. Yes. And then we have Glenn White, who's the director of marketing operations, infrastructure for electronic arts. So Glenn is in charge of essentially a little bit like Brian, analyzing the market and understanding where ad tech and marketing technology goes and how electronic arts, as a leader in the gaming kind of industry, can take advantage of that and carve a strategy around knowing better about their customers and their marketing data. Great, so I'm going to get started with hopefully my next slide. If I can click. Let me try this. Here. So Brian, could you tell us a little bit from your perspective, how do you see the kind of revolution around data and the ability for organizations to understand their customer better, understanding their marketing performance better, understanding media better as a result of owning data? How do you see that influence the structure of the marketing department and the role of the marketing department within the business?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for everyone for coming. Well, what this slide is a good way to simplify is the idea of just how small and how early all of this is. And what the slide is showing is just a very crude estimate of how much is spent on marketing globally in a given year. By the way, if someone can define for me what marketing is with precision, maybe we could get to a specific number, but as I think we all know, there's no one definition of what marketing is. But taking some very simplistic assumptions, it's in the trillions, right? Paid media is in the hundreds of billions, again, depending on how you define it. Services and agencies are, we can estimate, about $100 billion. Services not included here, but the likes of the Accentures and other consultants doing marketing tech integration are the tens of billions. And actual spending on marketing technology and managing data is ultimately low tens of billions of dollars. And so when you think about that, and that number would have been a zero, depending again on how you defined it, 15, 20 years ago, certainly. So it's very early in terms of how all of this is impacting business. Data has influenced how marketers have made choices going back to, so at Interpublic, I replaced a guy named Bob Cohen who started in 1948. And he told me, if anyone knows who he is, He's a legend.
1948. I just want to say this.
So he told me about problems that he was trying to solve for, the famous Coke pitch of 57. We all remember that, right? And he was trying to explain to me how they were trying to optimize a radio campaign to drive sales. Well, the concept of the DMA didn't exist. Nobody really tracked where radio signals went. And there was exactly one mainframe computer on all of Madison Avenue. McCann Erickson had it, so they were okay. Anyways, but people have been trying to figure out how to apply data to marketing, certainly for as long as it's been possible. But obviously, it's now at our fingertips. And we're starting to think in terms of changing our marketing organizations, certainly evidenced by the people on the stage here and companies like yours. What I see is a continuum of companies, and certainly I spent a lot of time when I was at IPG and do now as a securities analyst trying to understand how marketers organize themselves and why they structure the way they are. It's pretty rare that larger companies have significant, certainly marketing technology executives like yourselves. But I think that there's a lot of people who are trying to work with data in their existing functions. But I don't know that a lot of organizations have really transformed their structures yet. It's so early, is I guess what I'm saying, and it's a multi-decade process over which this change will occur.
So we do see, a lot of evolving roles in marketing, what we call the kind of slash roles, people who have one core role and also have an additional role that is maybe a little bit outside of the traditional marketing remit and touches other aspects of the organization, and the connective tissue between those is data. Yeah. Because ultimately, to communicate and to collaborate across those functions, they need to have a common platform in order to be able to understand, so what are we doing, how are we measuring what we're doing, and what basis are we measuring it on. Now, obviously, you're talking about the mainframe computer. We all think, I think we all had a little bit of that through Mad Men, the mainframe computer.
Yes, that was what it was. Although Mad Men was 10 years after the anecdote I just described. Yeah.
And today we all have, obviously we all have computers, and computer power is accessible in order to kind of handle the data. That's not really where the problem is today, right? The issue is more around the diversity of the data sets. Right. And I mean, you're very well versed in the diversity of how media gets measured. Let's not even go yet into the marketing and everything that organizations do outside of paid advertising, which, as we see on this slide, is a lot. Right. But just simply thinking about paid advertising, you are very well versed in the data sources available to understand that.
Yeah. I think, where data has been used and maybe is more mature at this point is certainly like the marketing mix modeling or media mix modeling and some of the analytics around that. And a lot of this is really more about optimizing existing roles and existing functions. You go back to 1957, this example I give you, it's like, should Coca-Cola spend their money in the Boston market versus the New York market if you're going to prioritize resources? And really that's optimization. And so much of what media has been about is about optimization, taking your like-for-like spend and driving it down if you can. And that's wonderful and all, and that's, I think, an important function that all marketers have to manage for. But it's not really business transformation, as I think we all think is possible, where you start to manage your business around discrete segments. I think we could argue that the likes of the Ubers, the Netflixes, the Amazons of the world are certainly managing their businesses more through the lens of what data tells them. And I think that companies who are older than 15 years old probably have a really hard time, I would think, re-engineering their business.
Right. And essentially, in between kind of this paid advertising bucket where we see the data sources exploding, even in traditional media. We had a long conversation in the car this morning about that, right? How does the data source explode even in TV? Yeah. And how hard it is to understand what is that really?
Well, and I think sometimes people just take an old convention of how to look at data and don't think of what's possible.
Yes. And also with digital, how you now have to, as a marketer, handle the plethora of platforms that you need to execute just to get in that bucket. And that is across agencies, across territories, across brands, etc. So, that's kind of the bucket of optimizing my paid advertising. And then within the marketing bucket here, we are around, so how do I, as a marketer, understand how I can impact my business with the activity I'm doing, right? And so we're going to kind of go through a journey with our panelists here of a journey of how am I looking at my marketing performance data for very different industries, very different situations, with different types of accesses and challenges and opportunities around data. Before we do that though, let me just tell you a little bit about Datorama. Datorama is a marketing engine that helps you integrate all of your marketing performance data and helps you report and analyze and optimize these both types of decisions, one being obviously your marketing optimization, the other one being how does my marketing influence my business results ultimately. And Alexis, ABN Amro has, with you, engaged on this journey for a little while now. And so, this project kind of has been going on for a little while. And could you tell us a little bit first about ABN AMRO's business, the structure of the marketing department as it operates, and then kind of the onset of the project?
So, is this working? Yeah, perfect. So, ABN AMRO Financial Services, it's a very large and big company, but the marketing department is basically divided into independent business lines and business units. Each have their own client groups, their own targets, their own objectives, and their own marketing activities. Where it comes together is with our marketing communications department. That's where I'm working. And they basically translate the different objectives from the business lines into media plans, advertising, and media spend or the buying. And now, since since we started on this project, we're also centralizing the data there across all the business lines. So
in terms of kind of getting your marketing performance data together, and building a platform for collaboration across your business, how did you go about the project internally? Kind of getting the project going. How did you think about this? And what are some specific challenges that you were kind of working with in terms of complexity?
Yeah, I think the way we looked at it, it basically started out of confusion, out of clutter. We don't know our performance, or we're seeing different numbers and different reporting in all different levels of the organization, but also with our agencies. So I think that was our biggest challenge. That's where we started. Okay, what do we have? What is our landscape? What are our sources? Are we measuring the right things? Do we have gaps? Is it reliable data? Can we use the data? How are we looking at it? And how are we using it? So how are we measuring our performance, and what decisions are we taking on the basis of that? I think that's where we started. And what we wanted is collaboration. We wanted clarity for all the business lines, but also for our media agencies, and to be more in control of our campaigns. So looking at the performance, bringing it together, and having one platform and one truth that everybody's looking at. So no discussion on numbers, we're all looking at the same thing, and speaking the same language, basically. I think that was the main objective, so that you can be driving decision making instead of talking and collecting numbers and talking about it and arguing about it. Really making decisions and taking action on the numbers. Yeah.
I think one of the things about the arguing that you were telling me was one of your kind of challenges was, until you had this platform, you would spend more time within kind of a meeting discussing whether the number was really the number.
Yes.
Or rather than kind of, talking about, so this is where we stand, this is our strategy.
Yeah.
What do we do, and what do we do with which partner in order to move ourselves a little bit further along to where we want to be in terms of a business? So clearly, once you solve that basic understanding of, we all agree that this is the number, and we know that the number is going to be there next month and the month after. And now we can start benchmarking, and now we can start understanding how we move forward. That's a completely different world. Now, could you kind of give us an example of a type of decision that you have been making based on the fact that those numbers were available across maybe several departments, and and kind of describe the kind of things that were being made possible for you as a business from there?
Yeah, I think the most challenging was really getting everybody to agree, obviously, a kind of mutualization of all the departments. I think building a KPI structure, that was the first thing we did. We looked at all the different sources and all the different types of reporting with the business, involve them. And we built one syndicated KPI structure from brand to the lowest level sales, and worked from there. I think the sources that we also chose was really to look at which numbers are leading, what decisions are we making here, why are they leading, and can we get everybody on one page. And I think that really worked, because in the beginning it was very much searching and a lot of opinions, and but also people saw the advantages and they wanted to have this one place to go to and see what numbers there were, and how to act on their campaigns, and how to have immediate access and ready to use and go, and not be worried about what they're reporting to management, but also what they're doing to optimize campaigns or look at different strategies.
And I mean, I guess it takes a fair amount of internal persuasion to get something like this going, right?
Absolutely.
So, your role isn't solely dedicated to this, if I understand well. You have other responsibilities within ABN Amro. So, could you tell us a little bit about the onset of like yourself within this journey, and your journey of internal, taking this project on and persuading internally and kind of taking that on?
Yeah. So it's true, if you start on this project, it's not about delivering, it's really about change management and adopting. So don't just deliver a dashboard, make sure people can really adopt to it. The persuasion path was, I think we underestimated it in the beginning. There were a lot of very many stakeholders, and we made a plan eventually just to talk to each of the teams, get them together, put them in one room, and make sure that you find common ground between them, and also make them realize that there's common ground. Often they feel that in their own silo that's their world, and they don't look across the business. But when you put them together, there's much more understanding of each other's work, but also they see the common ground and how they can profit from each other and profit from the learnings from each other. What we also did, and we were fortunate that we were able to appoint ambassadors in each of the teams, in each of the business lines, and we worked very, very closely with them. And they would also, come back and go to their own teams and present, or we would go with them and do morning sessions or demos, so a lot of learning, explaining, education and training.
Thank you. And so in terms of, what you have to deal with in a project like this, just to put a little bit more color on this, back to the conversation we were having this morning around data and what shape the data really comes in, and this huge project you embarked on in terms of some data sets that you kind of looked at a little bit closer, Brian. It's interesting to understand that on this journey that you're just describing, there are the challenges that you understand, the ones that you can, ones that you can really kind of foresee, and then the ones where you are going to have to deal with what reality is in terms of the materials that you're getting and how you make those materials better. And obviously the data is diverse, as we all know. The data isn't necessarily particularly clean, and it's getting more and more diverse. But also more and more important to get your hands on, not only if you want to understand your media, your media spend, but also media consumption in general. And I think, Brian, would you mind sharing this anecdote about the TV data that you were looking at?
Oh yeah, well, so I am a relatively recent customer of Nielsen with access to something called NPower, which is the respondent level data. And one of the problems in managing the data, and if you want to do, I don't care about what the rating was of the VMAs or the rating of this program or that program. I'm really trying to understand programming strategies. I'm trying to understand the relative importance of certain properties. I'm trying to understand, for lack of a better word, the business, right? Or continually refine my appreciation of it. And I think that a lot of the ways that the trade looks at it, like a buyer looks at it, is interesting and it's relevant when you're trying to manage a specific spot and dot, but it's not the way to study the business. So before I can properly do this, I've realized that I need to re-tag every single program that is tracked. Because take a program like Oprah Winfrey, right? It could be coded as the Oprah Winfrey Show, Oprah Winfrey, Oprah No Space Winfrey. It could be misspelled. And that's just one property. And then you've got another issue of like what genre it is or not. And
can you give us an idea of the magnitude?
Well, it's just, so I did spend about a week, and all I wanted was a couple of years of data. I had to manually retag 40,000 program names.
And so, this is just to illustrate that the data around consumer insights or paid advertising or contextual research data, the variety and the complexity of it means that the journey you embark on as an advertiser means you need to have processes and technology, of course, to help you. And on that front, Guibert, I think your journey at Pernod Ricard is a wonderful illustration of this. So could you tell us as well a little bit about Pernod Ricard, the business, Pernod Ricard, the marketing kind of structure, and your project and how you went about it?
I think we have more or less the same life, so I'm happy. So I think Pernod Ricard business, I think each about you come across one Pernod Ricard brand at least one day in your life. Whiskey, champagne, and wine, everything. The thing is, we are very decentralized, and the decentralization is the mindset at Pernod Ricard. That's why it's overcomplicated to align people in one framework, in one way of measuring things.
So just an order of magnitude on that. How many markets are we talking about here?
We are talking about 85 markets. That means 85 countries. We operate in 85 countries. But we have 25 countries that matters. That means 80% of the turnover is made by 25 countries. So our focus was for the 25 countries that matters. It's huge. We have, beside the market company, we have brand company. That means we have Irish whiskey, we have Chivas, we have Absolute as a vodka, we have wine in Australia. So everyone should be aligned on the way we measure things. And it's still a journey, but the question is how we start this kind of project. It's more about the new mindset at Pernod Ricard. Our new mindset is to be consumer-centric, and it's very complicated for the company like FMCG company who don't have the direct relationship with consumer. We don't know people who buy our product because we have the bars, we have Walmart, we have a lot of hotels, restaurants, but we don't have this direct relationship. But in the meantime, the world is changing. Everything becomes more and more connected. And we think that if we don't own this new relationship with the direct consumer, we miss something. That is why our new mindset is to be directly focused to the consumer. And what is the way we can get data from consumer? It's only on digital now. It's only in partnership with the bars, with the Wi-Fi, with the airport. We have a lot of things to do in this direction. And that's why we started this project. It's not only a change management project about how to get data from consumer, it's how to be sure that our marketing is effective.
And so in that kind of journey from, understanding how you're measuring your marketing across a complex setup, of course, markets, but also brands, who partially own some data, who work with different agencies in different markets, etc. From that journey to understanding your consumer better, of course, there is a strategy and there is kind of a, execution there. And as you embarked on that strategy, you decided first to kind of build a common framework around how things were going to be measured.
Exactly. I think the first thing we did is we sent an email to all the company and we said, in the next year, we are going to fail in the measurement strategy. We know, but it's fine. We're going to fail because we don't know exactly what matters in your business. So if we ask to each of you what matters, we will have different answers. So we are not going to do that. We're going to impose you something. But we are very decentralized, so when you impose something, people don't care. And that is where the game is very, very exciting, because you start something, you say, we define this KPI, you should use this KPI, and people don't give a shit. And it's fine. But when you come up with one execution that works, and you have a Cody and a CAMEX presentation, everybody say, I want that. And now, your phone is busy because everybody calls you.
So you created alignment by, kind of getting executive buy-in into a result that you were going to provide, with a certain number of KPIs that you were going to be able to provide to them in terms of measuring their marketing performance, and that then allows you to build a level of standardization across your entire kind of marketing execution, and then you went on a journey to execute on that.
Exactly. I think the most part, because when you define something up front, people think that, okay, we are waiting because we are sure that it will fail. And we say, okay, it's fine. Now you put a lot of pressure of your tech vendors, because the tech vendors come on board when you already have something. Because you need to have something up front. Because the tech vendors always have things to sell you, and when you work with your agency's partner, things always work. You never fail. You always have good results for the execution side. But what we're trying to do, what we did, is we syndicate and we execute in-house with the help of tech vendors, and the tech vendors was Datorama, but we execute in-house to measure from the end, from the starting to the end, so we have everything and we can manage everything and we know everything, so we can answer all the questions.
So thank you. Brian, I kind of want to go back to your slide. Back to your slide. Here, this one. So the marketer owns this entire kind of, marketing bucket. And obviously agencies, publishers, ad tech, marketing technology, everybody is trying to bring solutions to the marketer, which increasingly, obviously, and that's one of the reasons why you are covering as large a sector, because you're covering, again, agencies, publisher, ad tech, and marketing technology. There's a reason why you chose to do that, is because you understand that all of these players are truly players within that kind of bucket of marketing dollars, right? And you mentioned that we are at the very beginning of this. Do you see how marketing technology, agency services, publishers, and ad tech together continue kind of evolving, bring solutions to marketers who need to understand their consumer?
Well, maybe I should first of all preface or take objection to a comment you just made. I don't think that marketers, the people whose job titles are marketers, actually spend that money. They have to influence. I mean, you guys hit on it exactly, and I've seen this upend, and I'm constantly explaining to investors this fact that you can't tell your people what to do typically. I mean, it's impractical, because unless there are not many companies where the person with the marketing job title owns the P&L. And especially when you've got centralized marketing groups, I've got this slide of an organogram, an organizational structure model that I think covers maybe 100 of the 200 largest. I actually modeled it on Microsoft. You'll appreciate it. And I've seen this time and again, where they've got a bully pulpit if they're lucky, right? They might have the ear and hopefully support of the CEO, but the reality is the marketing department in many organizations might report through to procurement. Procurement reports maybe jointly to the COO and jointly to the CFO. The person with the CMO title might actually be relatively powerless in terms of actually dictating anything. That's a necessary outcome of how organizations have to operate. I mean, again, some organizations can be much more streamlined. Single brand companies, I think it's maybe it's easier, I'm not sure. But given that fragmented nature of the responsibilities around marketing, what I think happens is the people in those central marketing groups continuously influence. They will put case studies out. They find champions internally. It's about internally selling through the ideas.
And clearly for that, a platform of KPIs to kind of collaborate and agree upon is I guess, the reasons why some of what you guys have been doing is so important. And so, if we move on to yourself, Glenn, and I'm going to try to this time not forget to put on the right slide. Sorry, everyone, about that. So Glenn, EA is an organization that has obviously a lot of knowledge about their customers and has embarked upon a journey of understanding their customers, understanding their marketing data for quite a while. So could you describe to us again, the business, the structure of the marketing department, and kind of your strategy around that and how you're executing on it?
So for EA, I listened to all the stories and they're all really, really familiar. But the interesting thing is, for EA, we have kind of a mantra that's been since Andrew Wilson took over as CEO, which was that we were going to be player first, right? So Guibert mentioned being customer-centric. How many people have worked for a company or work for a company who claim to be customer-centric? Raise your hand. This is the interactive part of the presentation. Okay. People with their hands raised, how many of you have federated your data and have a single persistent identifier for each one of your customers? You can keep your hands up if you have it. Okay, I'm counting one of all the people that raised their hands about customer-centric. Now, that's not necessarily something that you need in order to be able to be truly player-centric. I'm going to use the word player in place of customer because that's how we think of it. But the idea that you have your CRM data over here and your customer service data over here and your purchase data over here and your players or your customers don't think of all your silos when they think about your brand, right? They only know that they're dealing with you, right? They're dealing with EA. And so they expect when they call the call center that they know what was purchased. They know how many emails you got. They know all this other stuff. And that sort of mindset became really transparent when we started realizing what the communications were that were going out to our players from all of these different groups, right? And so the story that you're hearing, like, we don't know who's sending out what. We don't know what banners, and paid isn't talking to owned, and owned isn't talking to earned, and we don't know what the customer service center is doing. Like, you're sending all sorts of mixed messages out to your players. And so if you're really saying to yourself, hey, I want to be customer-centric, then you have to organize everything around your company so that your customer is at the center of everything that you do. And that's really, really difficult to do, right? You have to have sort of, they talked about gaining the consensus or selling it through or showing some proof and all this other stuff. And all of that is true at EA, except that EA raised their hand and said, we are going to be player first, full stop. And once you have that lens and you can say, we're going to be player first, is what we're doing here, we're going to go ahead and create another data set. Is it key to the primary key? Can we actually leverage that data in all of these other places where we have data? Are we using the additional data as a force multiplier instead of just having another data set that we have to deal with? All of a sudden, all of your decisions become pretty clear. I won't say easy, because sometimes you realize that by federating your data, you're creating a whole new set of problems, right? You can't keep all your data in a single place, even if you want to federate the data. You have to figure out what the right primary key is and how that ties to all sorts of other stuff. But at EA, we raised our hand and said, we want to do this. This is something that's important to us. And so now, whether it's internal, right, where we're fortunate enough that we are not FMCG, right, insofar as when we talk about collecting data, right, we do video games, right? So if you're playing a video game, you're by definition online, and we have petabytes of that telemetry that we know what you're doing and what you're playing and so on and so forth, mainly to improve the experience, right? That's the player-centric thing to do. We see that you're getting stuck at a given point in a game, we want to help nudge you along, or we want to change the game so that more people get through that point. And so once you start realizing you have to federate all this data, then it sort of starts extending to other places. Well, wait a second, if we're really talking about what the journey is in order to be able to get somebody to convert, to buy a game, then I need to understand what banners they're seeing, what videos they're watching, and what they look like on social, and who they're talking to. And while it starts getting, people talk about it being creepy and we're everywhere, we're not. I mean, when we put out a banner ad, when we do display, we expect to understand who's actually seen that ad. So for us, we don't do situations where we buy mass and we don't get individual grain data back, right? Oh, overall you had this many impressions and this is your click-through rate. Not good enough. Who saw the ad and who clicked, right? And you can work with companies like Google and others in order to be able to get that data back, provided that you agree to anonymize it and there's privacy issues and so on and so forth, but you can work through all of that. Once you do that, then you realize that you're really starting to look at what that player journey is. You know what they're doing in terms of purchase or in terms of gameplay. You know what they're doing in terms of seeing all of the pay that you put out there. You're looking at what the amplification is in terms of earned, right? You see that with like, look at this really cool asset I'm going to give you for free. Go ahead and share it with your friends, right? You see all of that stuff, and all of a sudden you're looking at what the true player journey is all the way through. And it's not just, here's the banner ad, and here's the click, and here's the purchase. That's kind of simplistic, right? I think nobody believes that you see a banner ad, you click on the thing, and you buy a $60 game right away. That doesn't happen all that often. There's the whole traditional funnel, right?
And so on that journey to understanding, from your base data sets to understanding user by user what is happening and allowing you to do further analysis into your funnel and path analysis and attribution, let me just go down to the really pragmatic aspect of it that we were discussing yesterday. So, to the same level as Alexis and Guibert have aligned their business around, certain KPIs, certain goals, etc. You went on a journey to align people around naming conventions for your media in order to not just have links around people, players, but also be able to have additional layers of insights into your data that would be coherent across everything you do.
Yeah, data cleanliness is kind of, I use the term religion kind of advisedly at EA, where the idea that your nomenclature has to be just so that all of these things have to be named, that we have teams of people who do exception reports if things fall out of the convention or whatever it is, and you have to, right? Because if your data is not clean enough, then all of the insights that you gain are missing key components, and you can't actually do all of the things that you want to do on an individual grain basis. I do want to sort of call out the fact that they talked about how they got to their KPIs and what that argument was and so on and so forth. That's actually an interesting journey at EA. We did it in the reverse order, right? We didn't know what our KPIs were supposed to be, right? We knew that we wanted to get to sales at some point, right? Everything sort of boils down to revenue at some level. But you have to figure out what those proxies are. In order to be able to get those KPIs, what we did is we got all our data. And we looked at all our data and said, oh, this is what success looks like. Okay, now what are the proxies? What are the key indicators, right? I mean, that's what KPI stands for, right? Key performance indicators. So if you have all of your data in front of you, you can kind of look at your data, and as our data gets better, we constantly evolve that and say, all right, these are the 4 metrics, and at EA we do. We have 4 metrics that we measure in terms of success, in terms of marketing for players. And
And thank you very much for that wonderful segue into my conclusion. Essentially, what we've kind of wanted to talk to you about today with people who actually experience this in their day-to-day is the journey towards understanding your marketing performance better, optimizing your marketing better, and understanding the impact of your marketing on the business goes through an understanding, of course, of the market and where the market is going and how important this is for your business. But in terms of strategizing and executing on this, there are multiple kind of ways of doing this. And we see marketers start with the KPI framework, or marketers build the KPI framework after they start having the data in. We see marketers having a strategy around unifying the data before they get started. We see marketers starting and building consensus around how the data should be unified and input after they start having results and after they start having things that are kind of going to their stakeholders and building consensus. So there are really multiple ways of embarking on this journey in regards of the structure of your marketing department, your business, your industry, and what ultimately where you are within your strategy. And so we had some wonderful illustrations of this today with Alexis from ABN Amro, Guibert from Pernod Ricard, and Glenn Wine from Electronic Arts. Thank you very much. I kind of would like to take the last few minutes to open this up to questions to the audience. I think we had a microphone that would go around, and if it doesn't, yes. Right, wonderful. If anybody has any question, we'll bring a microphone to you and, you know, kind of raise our hands. Okay, you can take mine. I've talked enough.
Thank you. Good morning. Hagen from Freestyle. I wonder, Glenn, you mentioned that you took the other way around. You looked first at the data, tried to figure out what are the KPIs, and then put them into place. How much trust do you first have to build into your data that you can trust the result of your analysis versus going the other way around where you don't trust the data yet correctly altogether, and therefore you build the KPIs and later you might come back all right?
That's actually a really interesting question, and the answer to that is if you build a KPI for data that you can't get, you don't really have KPIs, right? So we started from the idea that we had to work with the data that we had. We had good data from, you know, we buy a lot of media through DBM, right? And so our data is really good from DBM. I mean, you know, to the level that any reporting data is good on programmatic, right? And so we trust it to a certain degree. That people trust that DBM is good or not is kind of a, if people don't trust that level of data, then you kind of have difficulty outside of that, right? If you talk about starting with that and say, all right, we know what this is, we're able to match it to conversions, which we can do, right? Like I said, we're fortunate insofar as somebody takes a game, puts it in a console, we know it's you, right? There's no disputing that fact. And if you have a primary key that allows you to match what's on the Google side to what's on the EA side, and we do, then you're able to, without a doubt, say, all right, they saw all these ads and this is what it is, and the metrics that we're looking for, the behaviors that we're seeing look like this, and this is what the media behaviors look like, or the event behaviors look like. The trust is pretty high for that stuff. We don't claim to have data that we don't have. That's kind of the article of faith, is that we don't create a metric and then go, and then we'll approximate what that data is, because then it raises the question of trust. Can you trust that?
We may have time for just one last question. Anybody?
That makes a lot of sense for an e-commerce orientated company. For a company with more of a brand heritage, did you find it more difficult to build a business case internally to create the merit for a central repository of consistent KPIs?
Yes. So I think we never have access to sales data. Never. it's complicated because of IT, because of system, it's complicated. We need to find proxy like you. But marketing people are not used to work with proxy, are not used to work with sales because we are creative. It's not true all the time, but we can't build awareness a lot of time. We have two levels. We have awareness. We need to build awareness, especially for brand heritage, and we need to work on conversion. But the key question here is, how could we measure the conversion? Because if we success on measuring the conversion with proxies we define with our core KPI framework, we can say that, okay, our brand equity, so our awareness is working. Today, we have a kind of proxy with panel data, but tomorrow what we would love to have is real data coming from consumer, from e-commerce as well, because that is a new route to market for Pernod Ricard, and after we can measure everything and say, okay, the awareness works or it doesn't work, so that is the right decision to make it work.
I have kind of an interesting sort of anecdote to that. About a year ago, I met some marketers from Coca-Cola who have very much the same problem. And the way that they want to start thinking about that is their biggest partners are actually their resellers, right? So places like McDonald's. And McDonald's does have this data. They do know that. And so there may need to be a creative way to get to that data, and you may need to change some of the way you market or tag or brand. But in most cases, you can kind of get there. And during the think tank that we were sort of discussing, we went through all these different verticals about, well, you can't really do it for X. And we said, well, what if you did this? And we came with some pretty good approximations that allow us to start to get to that data. And I think that that's the journey that Guibert is starting on right now.
That's right.
Thank you very much. That's the conclusion of our session. It was Datorama. We came, we saw, we conquered. Or we coming, we seeing, and we conquering, really. How to get ahead of the digital revolution using data. Thank you very much.